Hello, my friends. It is Thursday, December 5th, 2024, and this is the Daily Brief. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide you context in the war in Ukraine. There are 1,580 Russians off the battlefield, but before I get into that story, I want to get into something because it's going to be important that people that are listening to this understand that. Yesterday, a longtime viewer mentioned that she listens to my videos and she flagged something that I had as an error. This was Cheryl Waitley. If you've been around in these chat rooms, you'll know who Cheryl is. She said, "Yeah, you said 780 instead of 1780. I was just listening to you." So that triggered a thought. And I said, "Okay, let me put this out as a poll." Yesterday, a longtime viewer mentioned that she listens to my videos, and that gave me a thought. How many of you listen rather than watch? Perhaps I should place this on Spotify to spread it. And then, so I put that poll out. Exclusively watch is only 27%. Kind of watch, but mostly listen is 63%, and then just listen at 10%. So I know I have at least 10% that would just easily convert to something like Spotify, or there's an audience out there perhaps on Spotify that might listen. And then 67, I was worried about like camera quality. Oh well, I guess that's not that much of a thing when 67 or 63% just kind of watch but mostly listen. So, but that was good. I'm glad that I found that information out. So yesterday I put every episode since Thanksgiving, about 20 or so episodes since Thanksgiving, out on Spotify. So if you want to listen to it on Spotify, great. And if you would do me a favor, go listen to just one, just to provide a little feedback, just one. And then if you can give it a rating so that it can help spread on Spotify and get up to speed. I'm going to be putting this on YouTube and on Spotify to hopefully spread some of this information. Okay, let's get back into where we were. 1,580 Russians off the battlefield, 13 tanks, 22 armored fighting vehicles, 21 artillery systems, 97 vehicles and fuel tanks. So 1,580 is a little lower than where it's been. It's weird even saying that 1,580 is on the low side, but yeah, and you see this trend. It's a little bit lower than recently. Overnight, Russians launched a missile and drone attack. 2 Iskander ballistic missiles, 44 Shahed drones were launched, of which 30 drones were shot down and 12 suppressed. So that's 42 suppressed and one more returned to Belarus, 43 out of 44. So we're not seeing a lot of big explosions and damage to apartment buildings and things along those lines. Meanwhile, there was a blackout that occurred overnight in the Belgorod region in Russia, leaving 19 settlements without power, according to the governor. Don't know what caused that. I don't know if that was Ukrainian driven or if it was something else, but yeah, we just don't know yet. Andrew Perpetua, I don't have his list for today. His last list came out about 12 hours ago, so I didn't see a morning list yet, even though it's about time that comes out, and sometimes he's a little bit behind, and that's okay. But he said this: if you watch trends month to month, keep in mind that there are seasonal changes to data. People always forget about seasons. That's right. There are ebbs and flows, but it feels like almost summer in the intensity of the fighting. Like it just keeps ticking up rather than downward shifting like you would expect. Okay, but let's look at this. This is the British intelligence update, and I'm going to read every month of the war, the casualties. So the war began in February. By March, we had 386 casualties. April, this is 2022. April, 193 casualties. May, 231, June 172, July 173. Now we're talking about Russian casualties in the 100s and 200s in these early months of the war. August 236, September 354, October 415, November 559, December 537. Now that's the first year of the war, that's 2022. And then it's ticking up in January 701, February 770, March 776, and then it downticked a little bit into April, 568, 562 in May, 667 in June, 605 in July, 544 in August, 500 in September, 709 in October, ticking up to 952 in November, 967 in December, and that's the end of 2023. Going up further into January, 846, February, 983, March of 2024, 910, April, 899, and then this huge tick in May, 899 to 1262, and then just stayed high like that. June was 1163, July 1140, August 1187, September 1271, October 1354, November 1523. Wow. So that is casualties, and it just keeps elevating, and Putin just keeps sending more into slaughter. Speaking of that, let's go to the frontline analysis. Ukrainian forces regain control of Novy Komar in Donetsk Oblast, but there's not a lot of good news. They got this one little area. Ukrainian counterattacks has prevented Russian advances in the rear from a key stronghold in the southern frontline section. But most of it still is Russian attacks, and that's good because defending, you lose fewer casualties than if you're attacking. So here we'll work our way through this, and it's the same kind of pattern that you would have expected before. It's just the intensity is a little bit less, and you'll see that here. Northwest of the temporarily occupied Horlivka in Donetsk, 4 attacks. Kharkiv region, 5 times near Volchansk. Ramivka direction, 10 attacks. Lyman direction, 13 times. Kupiansk direction, 15 times. Kharkiv direction, 38 times, and Pokrovsk direction, 39 times. Now that's not in the 50s and 60s like we've seen, but it's still the same pattern that we've seen for the last 2 months or so. Okay, meanwhile, this is Dmitry at War translated. The stout Russian man in a mask is offering migrant construction workers service in the special military operation zone as a way to expedite obtaining a Russian passport. Judging by the situation, no one agreed. So I'm going to read what he actually has to say here. It's translated into English, and here's what he's saying. Just don't tell me you don't understand Russian. It's very simple. To obtain the Russian citizenship, you could sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. Now, he's talking to migrant workers who are there for day laboring kind of something, and he's trying to get them to come sign contracts. And the idea is this is a way of bolstering military service in Russia so that, they can take some of the pressure off. Contracts is between 1 and 5 years. When it ends, you are given a Russian passport and you become a Russian citizen. You won't need any work permit and so on. You will be 100% in the special military operation zone. Salary from 210 rubles monthly. I think that's more than what you make here. Free healthcare, resort-like life insurance, veteran status. Any volunteers? Raise up your hand. No? Okay, so nobody's planning on volunteering, and with good reason. All their heads are down. Nobody wants to even make eye contact. So, yeah. And then there was a meme of this guy that was putting his hand to his head and raise up your hand. And he had his hand to his head. Whoa, that was close. So, okay. Are you used to your new condition? Putin asked as he's talking to veterans who are mostly wounded. Putin looks very pleased and relieved at a meeting with Russians who lost their legs during the war. He's a psychopath, completely devoid of empathy, says Anton Gerasimov. Now, here's what Putin's actually saying. Are you used to your new condition? Yes, sir. Already new victories, achievements. Somebody's getting used to it. Somebody's got a prosthetic leg. Some guys have been walking with it for 2 years. A lot of achievements, victories, ambitions. That's a very good thing. That's very good. You have ambitions. You went into the combat zone with ambitions because there's nothing to do there without ambitions. You need metal there, and you have it. Despite such severe injuries, you still have all your ambitions. So everything will be good. Everything will be fine. What? Everything's good for Putin. He hasn't lost a leg. But there's no real empathy there. Maybe he's giving a pep talk. You can even try to put the best face on it that he's trying to comfort and assure them, but I just don't think the empathy is there that should be in a normal person. Anyway, all right, let's keep going. The launch of the Oreshnik was planned long before the U.S. allowed Ukraine to use ATACMS to strike Russia. Russia's chief of the staff, Valery Gerasimov, reportedly called U.S. Army Chief Charles Brown following the Oreshnik missile strike. He's actually the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's an Air Force general, Charles Brown, but okay. According to reports, the conversation took place on November 27th, 6 days after the ballistic missile hit Dnipro. Gerasimov claimed that the launch had been planned well before the Biden administration authorized Ukraine to use ATACMS for deep strikes into Russian territory. Well, that's really interesting then. So why were they claiming that this was retaliation for the long-range strikes into Russia from Ukraine? And I think what might be happening is it didn't work. It didn't intimidate like they thought that it was going to intimidate the Ukrainians. And so now they're making up this other story that this was planned long, long ago. It might have been planned to use this like as an escalatory attack, but as far as a plan that had nothing to do with it, I'm not exactly buying that. Meanwhile, Hungary vows to help Trump quickly end the war in Ukraine. Oh, that's great news. Foreign Minister Peter Cesaro claims peace, quote, has never seemed so close, unquote, adding that, quote, we are doing everything to make Trump's goal of ending this war a reality. Well, but it has to be ended on the right terms. And if it's not, then you have a problem. So NATO is discussing scenarios to end the war in Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. The alliance is planning to increase military aid to Kyiv to bolster its position in negotiations. Now, there are two potential outcomes that are being considered by NATO. First is providing security guarantees to protect Ukraine without provoking Putin by allowing them into NATO, and Ukraine's already said that that's a non-starter. And the second is creating a demilitarized zone under the control of European forces. Now, it seems to me that both of these work against Ukraine. Where's the demilitarized zone going to be? Within Ukraine, within the occupied territories already? Or is it going to be in Russia? They're going to demilitarize a zone in Russia around the Ukrainian border. You might be able to do something like that, and that would be palatable to Ukraine, but that wouldn't be palatable to Russia. So are you going to split it, half in Ukraine and half in Russia? I just don't know how this would actually work. But they shouldn't be talking about either of those scenarios. But this is silly. NATO should be providing all the demands that Ukraine should have, the maximalist demands, just like Putin's doing, so that they can actually find a place to meet, like $1 trillion of reparations to rebuild Ukraine and whatever other guarantees, and then your sanctions will be removed, but nothing else before that. Now, here's Garry Kasparov talking about how NATO was created to defend Europe from Soviet, now Russian, military invasion. It now says that the only country actually doing that, Ukraine, isn't eligible because it's defending Europe from Russian invasion. But once the invasion's over, perhaps it can join. It's perverse logic. And somebody replied, you're humanely, emotionally, rationally right. But technically, NATO is what it says, a defensive alliance. And Kasparov replied, NATO's founding statement, quote, to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of their peoples, founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law, unquote. Letting Russia destroy a democracy bordering 4 NATO nations is antithetical. Moreover, the idea was, hey, look, they keep spreading. We've got to do this thing so that they don't keep spreading. And even though they're spreading right now, we're just kind of sitting there going, well, we can't do anything because we draw everybody into a World War III. And Putin knows that that's how they're thinking. All right, now I haven't talked about this for a little while, but a few days ago, it was almost a week ago now, Jake Bro blew past that $1 million donation mark in his third big $1 million campaign. That's pretty awesome. But I haven't covered it just because so much news. In fact, there's so much news that what I'm going to do today is do my daily brief as I'm doing now. Then I'll do an international news segment. And then my 3 big stories will be all Ukraine. Okay. Sergei Sumileny put this out. As private persons, we can't send tourists for Ukraine, but we can send enough drones. Please consider a donation. As long as Scholz remains Germany's chancellor, we're all in danger. It's our duty to support Ukraine privately. Now, I'm showing you that because we're about to be rolling out another campaign like we did this time last year. Okay, just 2 more things now. Today is the 30th anniversary of the Budapest Memorandum. 30 years ago today, on December 5th, 1994, Ukraine agreed to voluntarily disarm itself of thousands of nuclear warheads, 176 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and 42 strategic bombers in exchange for security assurances from the United States, Britain, and Russia. Russia, who violated it, and Britain and the US, who are kind of supporting it, but not really to the point that they can actually throw the Russians out. On this day, ironically, also in 1978, the USSR and Afghanistan signed a friendship treaty. We invaded them a year later, so you can trust us with a peace deal now, says Darth Putin. And here's the New York Times headline from the next day. Today is December 5th. This is the Times article from December 6th about how they just signed that friendship treaty on December 5th. And then finally, I'm going to show you this. There's a little girl walking down the steps, this like hall of heroes or walk of heroes with the Ukrainian defenders who have fallen and their images on it. And she finds a picture of her father and she goes up and hugs the picture. It's so crushing to see that. That should never happen to anyone. And it's happening by the thousands in Ukraine, by the tens of thousands. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for those of you who choose to go over to Spotify and have a listen over there and leave a rating. I appreciate that so much. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.